All right. Looks like we're just about ready. This is working, right? I haven't been in this room yet, so it's difficult to hear. Anyway, welcome. Today we're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to talk about testing horror stories. We've chosen 3 of our new speakers who are new, maybe not to speaking, but to this conference, people we have not heard from before. And so we wanted to get them out in front of everyone. Now I would like for them to introduce themselves. We'll start with Petra, and then we'll go the other way for the actual stories.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Petra Bošková. I am here on the first time. I'm really enjoying this. And yeah, hello everybody.
What's your title and company?
Title and company. I am test coordinator for a smaller software testing company in Prague. We are focusing on financial and banking testing. Yes? Okay, I can make it.
Hi everyone. My name is Benjamin Bischoff. I have been working for Trivago for the last 15 months as a test automation engineer, and this is my first Selenium conference. So, hi.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Lewis. I am a QA engineer at GitHub, which is a fairly recent should I hold this closer? Okay. So I just joined GitHub 2 months ago after working at startups for a couple years and then being a consultant several years before that. This is my second Selenium Conf, both attending and speaking at. I'm really excited to be here.
Was Austin your first? Or
London last
okay, cool.
fall was my first Selenium Conf.
Cool. Well, I wanted to get you guys up here today to talk about some horror stories, some things you've seen in your career. I know that you have a doozy of one, but you wanted to talk about a different one because anyone who's been in this career longer than 2 or 3 years probably has multiple. So what I'm really hoping is that you interact with each other, talk to each other a little bit. The less I talk, the better. And if we have any gaps in here, then you'll hear my horror story, and nobody's going to survive that. So, Megan, let's start with you. What's the story you brought for us today?
Okay, so I'll start. And for anyone that was at my talk earlier, this is a completely different horror story. So I joined my first startup in the fall of 2015. And I was really excited about this opportunity because I was going to be the first tester in the organization and really get to define, what quality looked like at this company. And that was amazing for me after, coming from consulting and kind of being on projects where there wasn't so much space to have, creativity in terms of like all the tools and like frameworks that we were choosing. So I joined this startup. And when I got there was another tester, actually. No one had told me that this other individual had joined 2 weeks before I did. And, they also had a lot of ideas and were really excited about implementing things in their own way. And we clashed completely from the get-go because we had just different ideas about, the language that we wanted to write our test in, the frameworks that we were going to choose to do that, and just had different approaches to automation completely. So it was a challenge for us to learn how to work together nicely, and we had very passionate discussions at times about, wanting to do things our way. And I think this individual thought because I was kind of the more junior quality engineer that I should kind of just go along with it and listen to them. But it didn't happen that way. So it took a lot of time for us to kind of get on the same path. And after a few months, we eventually did that, and then this tester actually left the organization. But before that, we had actually got to this point where we were able to work together a little bit more smoothly. But it was kind of just a horror story, and one of the hardest times that I've had trying to communicate with someone and really kind of influence them to see my point of view. So
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because when I started at Trivago, the test engineers that were there before me left, both of them, and I didn't really know why. And then I saw the test suite, or or the test suites actually. Like every QA person had their own local test suite. There were no like unique, unified one. Everyone used different code styles, different technologies, and so we were on a mission to change all that. And we created a framework. We created code styles and everything. We thought we had everything completely planned, but then a few months in, we noticed that the QA guys didn't want to do it at all. We completely missed communicating with them properly. They didn't communicate because they felt everything was forced on them from our side. So we were at a point where everything was like threatened to go down again. So fortunately, we turned all that around by communicating properly, but that was almost too late.
Yeah, thank you. When I was thinking about my horror stories and what linked them all together, it's communication. I mean, seriously, we are all here talking about the same thing. I have here one story, a little bit different than yours. At the beginning, there was too much communication, and at the end, there was lack of communication. Because I was stalked at the work. My colleague secretly checked my attendance. And funny on this is that we were working only in the same office. We weren't only working on the same project. Only two colleagues sitting next to each other. And then one day I got an invitation to my email for a meeting in conference room. So I went there. He was sitting there. It was dark, like seriously, like from some horror movie or something. And he started to tell me, "Do you know, Petra, what you did?" I was like, "Not really." And then he said that, for example, 3 times last week I spent on my lunch 35 minutes and not 30 minutes. And how many minutes I spent in the toilet and when I wasn't really working. It was kind of creepy. And after that he gave me a notice to sign up and quit. I didn't really know what to do with that, so I just went to my test manager and I told him everything. He said, "Okay, now I will speak with this guy as well to be fair." I said, "Okay, fair enough." But after that, he didn't come to me and I didn't know anything. Nothing really happened and I was still with this guy in the office. And honestly said, it just demotivated me so much that 2 months after that, I quit the job. What is here important or interesting to think about, maybe this test manager should as well ask this guy what is his intention to do it. Why he did it, why he's talked to me. Because, funny way, 2 months after me, he quit his job as well. So communication is the key.
To me, that also speaks to a management issue. Your superiors not behaving the way they should and taking these things seriously. So that's interesting. So yeah, communication, absolutely. I'm curious to hear, Megan, like specifically, do you have like things that you have learned from them that you could use to turn that around? What would you do differently in this situation if you lived that through again?
Sure. So when I had joined this company and the other, tester had joined 2 weeks before I did, I knew that this individual was really excited about kind of like working on this like cool test framework and getting things set up. And I felt like, from that moment, I probably should have jumped in right then and like had, more detailed conversations with this person about the choices that they had made. Like for example, they thought it was a really good idea to use Java and Maven, even though our application was built in Node, and like hardly anyone in the organization had, Java knowledge. So that initially was creating kind of I guess, in isolation in a way, and like kind of a gap, and the people who would be familiar with actually using and maintaining these tests going forward. So I just think like having more information, and on my part asking questions and being really nosy and like in this person's business would have probably allowed me earlier to kind of bring up some of the problems that I was seeing, rather than like I kind of let them do a little bit too much work on their own, and then when they came back and like presented this thing to me and were really excited about it, I had to like find a nice way to kind of burst the bubble and not just be really kind of like negative Nancy about the situation. I wanted to kind of, gently put this person down, I guess.
Yeah, I learned a lot through that as well. I have to disagree with you on this. I'm sorry. For us, the test framework is written in a completely different language, and the tests are a completely different language as the application. But for us, that worked out pretty well because the QA guys didn't have any development experience anyway. So for them, it was it didn't really matter what they started learning. And because the automation team was all Java, anyways, we decided to go for a Java framework. But more importantly, what I learned is that it's absolutely not about technology, and you should never just think about automation because you heard it and everybody should have automation, but you should think at least twice or 3 times about why you need it and why it's important. And you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page, or you will have conflicts like very soon, as we saw. Yeah.
When I was in my situation, I was seriously thinking what to do. If to come to this colleague and discuss with him, okay, what is your problem? Or if to come to the management and discuss it with my management. Even my friend recommended to me to just have a lawyer and kick him out. As well the solution. But after that, honestly said, I wouldn't do anything differently because I think I did it the best I could. To deal just face to face with this colleague, at this point, I think it wouldn't lead anywhere. So yeah, I wanted to lean on my management. It didn't work. So at that point, I decided that when I will be a test manager one day, and my goal is to be in 2 years, I will be better than he was, and I will deal with these problems better than he did.
I certainly hope you would not tolerate harassment like he did. So that's another theme I'm picking up here, not just communication, but it feels like, and I've definitely experienced this in my role, I'd like to almost get like show of hands, it almost feels like management can't bother to deal with problems in QA. Is that a theme that I've heard accurately in this? It feels like that's a thing that I observe a lot in several jobs that I've had, as well as talking to people. It's just that at some point, management's like, I got enough troubles meeting deadlines and talking to executives and dealing with product management. You people deal with this yourself. And it's an awful environment to be in. Not to turn this into group therapy, but I mean, is this a thread? Am I noticing this accurately?
Yes, totally. I think that's a thread that you're noticing. And again, in like my situation, I did bring this up with the manager, and my manager just asked, "What do you want me to do about it? Like, this is your coworker. You should be able to have open dialogues with them and kind of resolve your own problems." And I think I agreed with that. And like in my situation, like I think I did want like kind of an intermediary to help us with some of the discussions that we were having that were getting like very excited at sometimes, and to have different points of views. But I think it probably just depends on the situation. But I was fine like having kind of a one-on-one interaction with this person, and then maybe like getting opinions from my manager or something. But yeah, kind of on my own.
Yeah, I also agree a lot. I noticed both. Like in one company I was before, management could not be persuaded into letting us test stuff. And they said, no, we don't need that, it's too expensive. And there was no way. Even the co-developers in the team said, no, we don't need tests, our code is great. And I was like, okay, I quit. So that was part of the reason why I was only there for 3 months, because I could not stand it. But yeah, on the other hand, it's also a bad thing when management tells you, okay, we need automation, do it. And then when you say, okay, we're almost ready to block pull requests, and through automation they say, whoa, wait, that's not what we wanted. But yeah, that's why I said you need to have a clear vision about what you want to achieve with automation.
I was just going to ask you to expand, Petra, if you could, on what do you think qualities you would want to grow in order to become this test manager that you want. You've talked a little bit, but expand on that a little.
Okay. What I wanted to say, it's not always the problem of management. Sometimes it's as well problem of people, because I've experienced so many testers who always just come to me and say, I don't like my job, I'm so highly demotivated. And I say, okay, so be motivated. No, motivate me. I was like, how? But the quality, I think this communication. Managers should listen to you, talk to you, and after that make things happen. Follow your career goals and feel the importance of motivation simply. Okay, so ask, okay, in 5 years you want to be there. Okay, I will encourage you, and step by step we will go there. So this is the main point.
I think Patty just talked about how this emotional maintenance is one of the most important and most overlooked aspects of any career, of any human motivation. But I find it lacking, particularly in the QA community, where we tend to enter the industry as underdogs. Patty wants to add to this.
Part of the problem is
Stenographers.
Part of the challenge is that the majority of software development, especially in the open source world, is done remotely. So it's even more challenging to build and establish that connection and positive regard and really understanding of the experience of your cohorts. So that's why it's so essentially important to develop and use these tools that we are able to use through a long distance in order to create that form of connection.
I don't know if you're keeping track, but this literally just became group therapy. So cool. We've got about 10 minutes left. So what else can we talk about with horror stories? I know that there's things to learn. Sorry? Okay.
About horror stories.
Sorry?
I have a question probably regarding horror stories.
You have a question regarding horror stories.
Following up the previous talk about Anshit, where he talked about stability of tests.
We're trying to get you a microphone.
So how about stability of test suites? As in this Facebook talk, we heard that they created a framework. Our company or our providers come up with a new and their own framework. Everybody comes up with a new framework. And have you ever faced problems with stability and frameworks from other people? Is there not a way to unify all these approaches?
So a technical horror story you're looking for, not
Yeah,
just communication, not
so
just management. Let's get the third side to this triangle.
Yeah.
Yes, love to hear.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. We have created our own framework because the framework that was used before, I won't mention names because it's a widespread one, that did not fit our use cases. It was also much too heavyweight for our case, and we experienced problems that we could not just fix in a few hours, but we would have to be a contributor to this project and make a pull request and then go through all that. We didn't have time for that. So we had to create our own framework, and I think it's a good choice. there is no perfect framework, I think, for that can be used by everyone and just be done.
Anyone else have too many frameworks? My company, I think we have 3. So, yeah.
We had our own framework for testing cars for Mercedes, but there was the problem that there was only one expert for support, because it wasn't our in-house. It was our in-house framework, and if there was any problem, and this guy was on the vacation, then yeah. So this is yeah. How to say?
Do you have any post-release issues you've dealt with where something slipped by and you have a crippling sense of guilt, anything like that? I mean, you shouldn't, but it happens. Any stories around that?
Yes. Yeah, I think everyone has those. Like, it basically just happened that all of our tests we have are read, every single one of them, because a developer just decided to remove a URL parameter that all of our tests were using. So I don't feel guilty about it, but he should.
Developers are the ones who introduce bugs 100% of the time.
Yeah,
is my contention.
I was a developer basically all my life until I became an automation engineer, and yeah, I know both sides. And yeah,
I can tell you, I had a test suite of too many tests, and I think on the order of 800. And at one point, we noticed that the build was dead. The software was not deployed properly. The site was completely down in the test environment. We noticed later that our timed build had executed 3 times in this period. Why were there 23 tests that passed of the 800? How is it that 23 tests are passing when there's no site for them to hit? That forced some reevaluation of our lives. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I would like to. I'd like to go further down the rabbit hole of the frameworks, because it's definitely a question that I'm hitting up with right now. I wrote a beautiful framework that eventually was outgrown reasonably. New framework was introduced while I was away from the QA profession for a little while. And now I'm trying to come back to it and not be too critical. So what kinds of coping mechanisms do you have when you encounter somebody else's framework that you have to deal with? What are the first questions you ask? I'm trying to think of this now too. Why? Why is a good one. Why Nightwatch is a good one.
why JavaScript?
Why JavaScript? I can't. It's a rabbit hole. I'm past that one. The reason, to Megan's point, the application's in JavaScript, and our developers do a pretty good job of writing tests in this framework, at least happy path tests, that we at the QA department then have to go maintain, and then we add edge case tests too. But that was a decision that was made. I am not about to upend that. So how do I cope with this strange world of weak typing, or whatever typing JavaScript is? You've encountered this where somebody tried to impose a strongly typed language in a place where you felt like it was inappropriate. Do you have coaching that you would offer to me?
Sure, that's a good question. No. So I guess in my situation, when that's happened in the past, like where I come in to a new project and there's a framework that we're using that I completely don't understand, or I just don't understand why the choice was made to use this framework. For example, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Robot Framework, but this was some framework that I was using on a project a couple years back, and it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me why we were using this type of framework. So usually I think when I'm just unsure about a situation, I just ask a lot of questions and just really try to figure out like what were the decisions made to kind of influence this decision. And in some situations, especially like with this team that was using robot framework, they were like, well, I don't actually know. Someone just said we should like start using this years ago, and then we just kept using it. Which sometimes happens. And then I have a lot more questions after that. Like, well, then if, you know, someone made this decision long ago and they're gone, then we can switch, right? We can use something else. So, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like probably a pretty good approach. I will be blowing up the Slack channel, hashtag QA for, for asking those kinds of questions. We have 4 minutes left. I would like to open it up to see if anyone wants to share a particularly bad horror story and what you learned from it. I feel like, Marcel, you've got one.
Marcus, we actually didn't hear your horror story.
Oh, you didn't hear my horror story? Sorry?
I have many horror stories, but I'm not in QA.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I do have a curiosity question about horror stories, maybe related.
You have a question about horror stories?
Related to the shift that we, at least at my company, see of more and more software testers and SDETs turning into developers, and even more so becoming in a DevOps type of setup. I think the testing language of choice automatically becomes the language of the app that they're testing, because they're also developing in this. Have you guys encountered those kinds of situations where the tester becomes the developer? And does that lead to horror stories?
It is a horror story.
It is a horror story, yes.
Have you not dealt with that? I have dealt with that a little bit. In my company, we hired three, I can think of three off the top of my head, three extremely talented QA folks who essentially in their interviews expressed a desire to stay in this career path because they know that they're unicorns, they're hard to find. And within 6 months, we repurposed them as developers because we simply need that talent, and it's hard to hire in Austin, Texas when you're competing against Silicon Valley and New York City. And it's great for them. I can't knock them for having made that choice, but I wonder sometimes what's wrong with us. To me, being in QA, being able to write code, you get to write more creative and more interesting code than developers. That's my experience. I've seen that firsthand and secondhand, that developers essentially in their first few careers at a big company especially, they're just fixing bugs. They're doing somebody else's features, whereas in QA, as a flip side to that thing where you're getting left alone to solve your own problems, you're getting left alone to build your own stuff, how you want to build it. So you have an intense amount of freedom that I find exceedingly attractive. I kind of wonder why people keep moving to dev. Doesn't pay better, at least in my world. So why do we keep losing good people to that? We have about 2 minutes.
For me, it's kind of the other direction, because I was like a full-fledged developer at first, but now I'm moving more towards QA. I'm not planning to be in QA, but I'm pretty comfortable where I'm today, like being the bridge between QA and the devs, because this is needed. I see so often that QA and dev are in a constant fight. I used to be as a dev, and now I see the other side too, and it's not nice.
Communication.
Exactly.
Management. Yeah. Cool. Well, we have about 1 minute left. Petra, anything to add? Anyone else? You know what I realized halfway through this is that my horror story is the one I'm still living through, so I can't. Patty wants to say something else.
Research shows that our millennials, and the millennials are the ones that we're hiring that are the brilliant coders, one of the number one things that they're looking for on their top 3 list is corporate culture that is supportive and where they can be happy, places where they feel supported. That goes above salary and benefits. So there's something to be said for creating an environment of safety and feeling connected.
I tell you, I've heard a lot of criticism, a lot of shade thrown at millennials, and I have not yet met these mythical millennials who are entitled and horrible. I'm not trying to kiss their ass because I'm trying to recruit them. Not at all. I'm saying it is a. It is, to me, it's completely reasonable, and I find them to be full of initiative, verve, energy, and talent. It's just awesome.